The flight deck was already alive when the order hit, not to launch, to hold. Out ahead of the strike group, in water that looked empty on every wide shot, reports were stacking up fast. Probable mine contacts, multiple strings, enough to turn the outbound track into a question mark. And that is the part most people miss. A US carrier is not trapped when it runs out of bombs. It is trapped when nobody can certify the water in front of it. That is the real hook here. How do 150 naval mines pin down one of the most powerful warships on Earth? Because the single point of failure is not the carrier. It is the narrow, slow, specialized chain that has to make a path safe for her. And once that chain is stressed, everything downstream starts to bend. On paper, the Strait of Hormuz does not look impossible. At its narrowest, it is about 22 nautical miles across. That sounds manageable until you shrink it to the traffic reality. 2 shipping lanes, one in each direction, each only 2 miles wide with a 2-mile buffer between them. That is not open ocean, that is controlled geometry. It is a corridor. Now put a Nimitz-class carrier and her escorts into that logic. A carrier strike group lives on maneuver. It wants sea room. It wants uncertainty. It wants options. In Hormuz, options collapse into lanes, and lanes collapse into confidence. If the Navy cannot say with high confidence that a path is clear, it does not matter how many fighters are on deck. You do not drive a 100,000-ton capital ship through suspected mines and hope the statistics are on your side. One mine does not have to sink the carrier to win the moment. It only has to mission kill the operation. That is where the trap begins. Because mines do not just threaten steel, they attack tempo. The public imagines mine warfare as a crude relic. Old metal spheres, visible horns, maybe something from a museum. That picture is dangerously outdated. In these waters, the threat can include moored mines, bottom mines, influence mines that wait for acoustic, magnetic, or pressure signatures, and air or boat-delivered systems that are cheap to lay and brutally expensive to remove. The mine itself can be simple. The effect is not. The moment a few contacts are reported, the water stops being transit space and becomes evidence. Every patch of sea has to be searched, classified, and either neutralized or cleared by process. Not by swagger, by process. And process is exactly what a strike group cannot accelerate on command. Here is the overlooked weakness this whole operation cannot absorb. Dedicated mine countermeasures are scarce, specialized, and slow compared with the speed of carrier warfare. The US Navy can generate enormous striking power, but the number of assets built to hunt and clear mines is tiny by comparison. For years, forward-deployed Avenger-class mine countermeasure ships in Bahrain carried that burden. Those old wooden-hulled hunters were designed for this ugly work. Now that force is in transition, with literal combat ships and unmanned systems taking on the role. Useful, modern, more standoff, but still limited, still specialized, still the bottleneck. That means the most expensive formation in the region suddenly depends on some of the least glamorous platforms in the inventory. And the enemy knows it. If 150 mines are seeded across likely approaches, the objective is not simply destruction. It is cascade. First, the Navy loses freedom of movement. Then escorts tighten up because nobody wants a destroyer blundering into uncleared water. Then air defense geometry compresses. Then the group's ability to reposition quickly, screen effectively, and choose its launch point starts to shrink. The carrier is still dangerous, but she is no longer flexible, and a carrier without flexibility is already under pressure. Now widen the problem one layer further. A carrier strike group is not just the carrier. It is escorts, logistics, airborne early warning, tanker support, weapons flow, maintenance rhythm, and the constant choreography of launch and recovery. In open water, that machine breathes. In the Gulf, under mine threat, it starts breathing shallow. Sortie generation looks powerful in brochures. In confined waters under persistent threat, every cycle gets heavier. You need wind over the deck, you need maneuver room, you need escorts in the right place at the right time. You need confidence that a sudden course change will not take you into a suspect area. And if the situation drags, you need fuel and ordnance resupply entering a region where the sea lanes themselves may no longer be trusted. This is the cascade most viewers never see. The minefield does not attack the carrier first. It attacks everything the carrier needs to stay on rhythm, and that rhythm is the real combat multiplier. Then comes the second downstream failure. Mine clearance is never done in a vacuum. While US crews are trying to find, classify, and neutralize underwater contacts, they have to assume the clearing force itself is being watched. Slow mine warfare units are exactly the kind of targets an adversary wants to harass with fast attack craft, drones, coastal anti-ship cruise missiles, and mini submarines. In Iran's playbook, that mix matters. Shore-based missiles like Noor or Qatar variants can reach well out from the coast. Fast boats can probe, distract, and saturate attention. Ghadir-class midget submarines can exploit shallow, cluttered water where sonar performance is never as clean as people imagine. So the Navy faces a chain reaction. If it suppresses all those threats first, clearance takes longer. If it clears while those threats remain active, the slowest, most specialized assets are exposed. Either way, the clock runs in the enemy's favor. And the problem was never the headline asset. It was the dependency beneath it. Here is the part that changes the whole picture. The carrier was not the true target. The target was the task force's confidence in one narrow strip of water. That sounds almost too small for the scale of the crisis. It is not. It is the whole mechanism. A carrier strike group can absorb missile threats with layered defense. It can distribute risk across escorts. It can launch fighters hundreds of miles. What it cannot do is bypass the requirement for a safe transit route when geography narrows and minds turn uncertainty into command paralysis. That is the major reinterpretation. Those 150 mines were not trying to outgun the carrier. They were trying to make the carrier irrelevant for long enough that everything around it began to seize up. If you want to understand naval power, stay with that bottleneck, because the next failure is strategic. Once merchant traffic sees suspected mines in Hormuz, commercial behavior changes before the full military picture is even known. Shipping slows, insurance spikes, convoys have to be organized, neutral traffic hesitates. Regional partners start asking how long the corridor will stay uncertain. Energy markets do not wait for complete mine clearance reports. They react to doubt. So now the Navy is no longer managing a single warship's risk. It is managing a global signal. And that creates another burden on the carrier group. The force has to deter escalation, protect shipping, avoid overexposure, and reopen confidence in the route without handing the enemy an easy symbolic hit. Because if a mine-damaged US warship appears on every screen in the world, the tactical effect is secondary. The political effect is immediate, which is why the response that followed was never going to be a dramatic charge through the suspected field. It had to be colder than that, more professional than that, and much more dangerous in ways the camera would not catch. What happened next was a reversal of roles. The carrier stopped being the spear point of movement and became the shield over the recovery operation. Destroyers and cruisers, where available, expanded the air and missile defense umbrella. Attack submarines and maritime patrol aircraft pushed outward to hunt the mine layers and watch for mini-subs. Helicopters and unmanned systems became the real main effort. MH-53E Sea Dragons, the Navy's dedicated airborne mine countermeasure helicopters, exist for exactly this miserable kind of day, towing gear to hunt, sweep, and neutralize. Newer mine packages on forward-deployed littoral combat ships push the work farther from the mothership through unmanned surface systems and airborne neutralizers. That is not cinematic in the Hollywood sense, but operationally, it is the moment the trap starts to loosen, because a blockade built on mines depends on keeping water uncertain. The instant the Navy begins turning uncertain water into certified lanes, the blockade starts losing oxygen. Not all at once, not cleanly, but measurably. One safe route changes the emotional map of the fight. Still, even that came with a hidden price. Mine warfare is not glamorous because it is repetitive, methodical, and unforgiving. Every hour spent clearing is an hour spent protecting the clearers. Every lane opened has to stay open. Every swept path can be threatened again if the adversary still has boats, aircraft, or subs capable of relaying mines. That means the operation is not just about clearing a field. It is about breaking the enemy's ability to refresh the hazard. And now the carrier returns to the story in a different way. Not as the trapped giant, as the pressure engine. Once the strike group no longer has to gamble on immediate transit, carrier aviation can be used where it matters most to hammer the surrounding kill chain. Coastal radar sites, missile batteries, fast boat bases, support craft, command nodes, storage points. The mine itself is hard, slow work. But the network that laid it is vulnerable. The trick is surviving the first phase without making a catastrophic mistake. That was the hidden factor all along. The Navy did not need to prove bravery by rushing the carrier forward. It needed to protect the one dependency the enemy was trying to overload, then reverse the cascade one link at a time, first restore a lane, then restore escort geometry, then restore logistics confidence, then restore tempo. Once tempo comes back, the strike group stops feeling trapped even before every mine is gone. That is why the title sounds dramatic, but the reality is more instructive than dramatic. A mine blockade in Hormuz is not a duel between a carrier and explosives. It is a contest between a massive combat system and a single brittle support chain beneath it. The side that understands that chain faster gets the initiative, and there is a larger strategic warning sitting under all of this. For decades, great power naval prestige has centered on visible assets: carriers, destroyers, submarines, stealth aircraft, missile counts, but choke points punish prestige. They expose whether a navy has depth in the unglamorous disciplines that keep power mobile under pressure: mine countermeasures, repair, reload, escort density, intelligence fusion, coalition coordination, sustained presence. Those are the hidden load-bearing beams. If they are thin, the whole structure looks stronger from afar than it feels up close. That is the deeper lesson of the Hormuz trap. In the opening moment, it looked like 150 mines had trapped a US carrier. In the real operational picture, those mines were testing something much bigger. Whether the United States still has enough resilient, specialized, ready capacity to keep a narrow sea lane functioning while under layered threat. That is a very different question, and it is the one question that matters before the first spectacular hit ever happens. Because in modern naval warfare, the first thing to break is not always the ship. Sometimes it is confidence, sometimes it is timing, sometimes it is the small specialist link that nobody talks about until the whole fleet is waiting on it. In Hormuz, that link can be a minesweeper, a helicopter crew, an unmanned surface vehicle, or a single certified transit lane 2 miles wide, tiny on the map, dull bearing in reality. So if you strip away the noise, this is what "then this happened" really means. The carrier did not win by overpowering the minefield, the Navy won, if it wins at all, by refusing to let a cheap underwater threat keep dictating every decision downstream, by protecting the bottleneck, by reopening movement, by turning the operation back into a campaign instead of a traffic jam under fire. And if that sounds less flashy than a missile duel, good, because that is how serious naval power actually works. The carrier was visible. The true battle was the dependency beneath it. And the next time a crisis erupts in a choke point, that is the first place to look, because the ship that dominates the horizon is rarely the thing most likely to fail first.